Sarah? I don't think I saw Sarah yet.
There's two Sarahs, but Sarah LePay says here and approved.
Thank you, Sarah LePay. Well, we have Sarah Kay. Are you with us as well? Just to avoid any Sarah confusions. All right, we'll move forward. Carol Steen.
Here and approve.
Thank you. Heather Zanzig. Stacy Anderson.
Here and approve.
Maya Sloan.
Here and approved.
And I will also vote to approve. And we've got sufficient quorum as we noted. So thank you all. Going through this, and y'all forgive my slow moving here. I've got 15 windows open and only 3 of them are helpful in the moment. Pulling up our agenda. So, old business, we don't have any today. We wanted to reserve the time expressly to take advantage of our panelists' knowledge. So we offered a little bit of backdrop before, but in the past couple meetings, we've asked for additional information to help inform what our other counties are doing, what other folks are doing throughout the state to deploy their funds in a meaningful way. A big part of what folks thought might be helpful in that effort is bringing folks who are doing this in other parts of the state and figuring out what we can learn from them, what levers they pull, what things and challenges that they might have faced that we can avoid facing by using their wisdom. And honestly, learning local government is just do it the hard way and then try not to make the same mistakes that others have. So I appreciate our panelists being with us to share with us any guidance and also advising on the landmines of implementing money in the different ways that we have. I believe, are all of our panelists with us now, Angeline, before I introduce them?
I am not seeing Dr. Shannon White from Cleveland County.
Okay. When she comes in, if you don't mind dropping me a message, and
Sure.
we'll go ahead and plow forward, can give her a call in the interim. So while we do that, just logistically, this is the first time that we've had a panel, at least in my tenure, via Zoom. So my ask is this, because it's a little bit more clunky than our typical meetings. If you have a question, if you don't mind, shoot that question to me, and I'll try to do the best I can to keep track of everything coming through the chat. I'll take those questions. If we end up getting a lot of the same ones, I'll merge them into whatever we need, and also have some pre-prepared questions that I intend to ask each of our panelists. And leave a little bit of buffer room on the back end to address any specifics about what we learn from them as we go. So I will skip Dr. White for now, but joining us for our panel, we have some amazing, in some cases, comparably sized counties, apples to apples comparison, and also some that have different resources and might help us aspirationally figure out what we should be doing or what things we can do to adjust. First up, to talk about Durham Pre-K, the first member of our panel, Dr. Linda, I'm going to butcher your name, Chappell, the Senior Vice President of Triangle Area Child Care Resource and Referral Services. So thank you for being here with us. Forsyth County Pre-K, Leslie Mullinex, who's Pre-K Priority Project Coordinator. Thank you for being with us. And Mecklenburg Pre-K, Dr. Mary Margaret Cantor, who is Chief Early Education Officer for Smart Start of Mecklenburg County. I'm really excited by all of these folks by background. Rachel did a wonderful job in reaching out and pulling some folks who have done amazing things in counties that are not easy to navigate. Last I checked, Meck was pretty big, as was Forsyth and Durham. So I'm really excited to hear a little bit about how they've navigated a growing population, because that's certainly something we're dealing with in Buncombe. And I'd be remiss if I didn't immediately pay attention to Dr. Sandler raising his hand. Did you want to? Oh, okay. Yes, round of applause for everyone. So thank you all for joining us. Could I give each one of you about a minute and a half or so to introduce yourself, and then we'll jump right into the heart of the questions, because I'm sure we're going to have a ton of really interesting things to ask y'all about. And we can start with, let's do in reverse order, because I can see Dr. Cantor on my screen.
Sorry, had to come off mute. Hi, and I am going to apologize up front. I do have to sneak out right at 2 for another engagement, but I will stay with you for this full hour and give you as much as I can from Mecklenburg County. So Mary Margaret Cantor, Chief Early Education Officer at Smart Start in Mecklenburg County. Trying to look at my program. So at Smart Start, we administer the Mecklenburg County Pre-K program, which I'll tell you more about in a little bit. We also provide funding for NC Pre-K, which is run by our local school district. So 2 separate programs, but all serving 4-year-olds, all in Mecklenburg County. That good for now? Enough for now? Okay.
Thank you. And let's see, Leslie, you are up next.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for the invitation. I'm glad to be here. I know several of you guys or have seen you on other Zoom calls, so it's good to see you again. My name's Leslie Mullinex. I am the project director here at what we call the Pre-K Priority in Forsyth County. And very briefly, we are a coalition of various organizations, individuals, philanthropy, centered groups that are advocating for more high quality pre-K opportunities in our county. So we are not a 501c3. We are just a coalition of different folks that are trying to move forward on some things in a collaborative, collective impact model. And we've been at this for about 9 years, and we've made some steady but small steps in progress. So I look forward to sharing more about that and some of the challenges we've encountered as well. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Leslie. And now up we have Linda. Are you with us? Don't have you on my
Yes.
screen. I'm sorry.
That's fine. I'm Linda Chappelle, and I'm actually joined today by Tamara Stevens, who's the director of our Durham Pre-K program. I asked her to come, but as the senior vice president at Early Years, I am also serving as a lead for a Durham Pre-K. At Early Years, we are an over 55-year nonprofit. Our vision is for all children to benefit from affordable, high-quality early care and education, which, as we know, lays the foundation for successful life outcomes. But at Early Years, we are representing the Durham community in management of the Durham Pre-K initiative, which is the Durham community's commitment to equitable access for high-quality preschool for all children in Durham. It is Durham's set a community goal to expand access universally, which I'll talk about a lot later. But we're representing the management agency, but the program is very much a collaborative across all publicly funded preschool in Durham.
Fantastic. And do we have Dr. White just yet? If not, I'll keep rolling. Okay, excellent. Well, thank you each for your introductions. That kind of supplants our first question that we're diving into here. But I'd love to hear a little bit more about your programs, but specifically asking about the scope and impact, right? So every county, as y'all know, is keeping track of numbers. Data is king in our world. We want to have measurables and things that are really showing that we're having an impact. Can you tell us a little bit about your programs with respect to the scope and the impact that it's having and how you're quantifying what that looks like in your respective communities? And I'm not calling on anyone in any specific order unless you make me, so happy to volunteer you.
I'll go. I'm fine. So I'm going to speak mainly about MEC Pre-K because that's the one I'm most directly connected to. Why is my camera wearing out? I have no idea what it's doing. So MEC Pre-K is an outgrowth of, interestingly, I'm doing a whole lecture on this on Thursday. And as one of my staff says, oh, you spout that in your sleep. So I kind of do, but it's called the Chetty Study. And it was a study published in 2014 that looked at the 50 largest cities in the United States. At that time, Charlotte was the 35th largest city, and it measured the probability of economic mobility, particularly of children born into low-income situations. And Charlotte scored 50th out of 50. Charlotte scored worse than most of the developed countries in the world. Your chances of moving out of a low income status in Charlotte were worse than any of the other developing countries that collect this data. So it was a very rude awakening. At the time, I was an associate dean at the local community college and oversaw the early childhood program. And because it spoke to two things, it spoke to early education and workforce development. Obviously, we were very shaken by it. Out of that came a task force that responded to the report. And then out of the task force came an organization called Leading on Opportunity that still exists to this day. And continues to work to address the 5 pillars that were identified as key issues in improving economic mobility. So that's the short version. So one of those pillars is early education, and out of that, the county, the city and the county committed together to begin a pre-K program that could address more than just, we already had, our school system had their Title I funding, which was used, and then NC pre-K. But the economists who wrote this study, and they were economists, they weren't interested in education at all. They just said these are the reasons or the things that make a place more, a person more likely to be mobile economically if you have these things. And a high quality universal early education system was one of those. So MEC pre-K was born. Short history, we're in our 8th year. We served just over 2,000 children, between 2,050 and 2,100, right in there, across the county. The only criteria to attend is you're 4 years old and you live in Mecklenburg County. We ask parents on the application to tell us which category of income they fall into, but they don't have to prove it in any way. So it's really just for us to collect demographic information and sort of inform us who's where. But of course, we see our enrollment, we know where they are, we know we're based entirely in child development centers. Otherwise, we pretty much follow the NC pre-K. Our teachers are all licensed, BK licensed. We follow all obviously, because we're in licensed child development centers. We don't specifically say you have to be a 4 or 5 star center, but honestly, when you go through the application process, if you're not going to get chosen anyway, because all the things that make you a 4 or 5 star center are also the things that meet MEC pre-K criteria. We operate on a school year calendar. Like I said, we're across the county. We just added 10 more classrooms this school year. And so it's a huge, huge commitment on the part of the county. Because the county and Smart Start both still, like I said, they both still provide funding to NC pre-K, and we work very closely with them. We work to make sure we're not oversaturating one area with classrooms and leaving other parts of the county barren. So we work together on that. We spread the love. We do joint PD. But I do still hold a completely separate budget and operate inside Smart Start.
Excellent. Thank you. Leslie, Linda, Leslie unmuted first.
Well,
Let's go.
I wanted to actually, I know Linda fairly well, and I wanted to ask if she wouldn't mind going first, because I think their programs are much further along in terms of scope, and then I can bring up the rear with what we're trying to emulate that they're already doing.
Good to see you again, Leslie. So let me just start by saying that this Durham Pre-K is very much a collaborative. However, there's a huge local investment, and the work that we do at early years to administer the program focuses on the local investment. But we work collaboratively with all of the public preschool funded through a variety of sources. So Durham, basically, back in around 2010, this issue started really getting very hot in the community around our children's success. So Durham Public Schools went through a period of challenge where many of the scores for third grade reading were not where the community expected. And, the overall issue of long-term children's success in school and in life is always forefront in our community's mind, but it became a very focused issue. So in 2015, the school board, the county commission, and the city council started talking about creating a task force. The 3 elected bodies did create a time-limited preschool task force, of which I had the privilege to co-chair, that pulled in 52 volunteers from around the communities, some designated by each elected body, some volunteering based on their interest and expertise, to spend 8 months really taking a deep dive studying this issue. From that task force, Durham Pre-K was born. The program began as a pilot, and I think the thing to know is that in this school year, we've started our 8th year of services. So Leslie referenced us being a little bit farther along, but we are constantly working to continue to expand, because in Durham, the community set a goal from that task force to serve 42% of the 4-year-old census, to serve 75% of the 4-year-old census, of which we are presently serving 42%. We have enough seats to serve 42% of the 4-year-old census. The difference with that is that, and pardon my voice, I've been sick, but the difference is that we have a universal goal that exists within programs that all have a variety of admission restrictions. So the local investment does not have restrictions. It is universal, but it is committed to expanding access to all 4-year-olds. So that 75% goal is to the 4-year-old census, not to, quote, eligible children. If you study NC Pre-K policy, they also have statewide goals, but it all says eligible children. So it's a very different goal. So we're at 42%, not where we want to be, but we've made progress over time. We were derailed some during COVID, as you can imagine, but growth has been sustained, which is something the community is very invested in and very proud of. So even though we have a universal access goal, we do prioritize the most needy children, and we do insert at 400, when families are at 400% of federal poverty level, we have a sliding scale that kicks in. So families contribute a modest 2% of their income to a monthly fee if they're at 400% of federal poverty. So in Durham Pre-K, so as I mentioned, we work collaboratively with publicly funded preschool, which includes the Durham Public Schools, Title I preschool resources, the Durham Public School Exceptional Children's Resources for those children identified with special needs. We work with Head Start. We work with NC Pre-K, and we have local dollars to fund programs. So we both enhance existing services and we create new seats to expand access. So Durham Pre-K creates access and creates services to improve the quality in the preschool programs across the whole county by funding a variety of quality improvement activities, intensive coaching, professional development for teachers. Also, Durham Pre-K provides support for higher wages and compensation for teachers by paying higher reimbursement rates that are currently available for NC Pre-K or other programs. So we invest in workforce development by supporting registered apprentices also. So we require the lead teacher in public sites or in private childcare, we require them to pay the lead teacher at the licensed rate. So all of our teachers are paid equitably using the local school board salary scale. So Durham Public Schools salary scale is applied to all Durham Pre-K teachers, all teachers of 4-year-old preschoolers. In addition, we, as I mentioned before, not only do we pay for new spaces, but we also enhance some existing spaces because, as you know, if you've been studying the system, NC Pre-K, for example, has a very low reimbursement rate. I know you've been supporting your NC Pre-K locally in Buncombe, but that, that's an acknowledged program an acknowledged problem I feel like we'll probably talk about a little bit more later. But anyway, in addition, we do use a mixed delivery system. So we partner with high quality community-based childcare programs, just like Mac Pre-K does, although we do require that the programs be 5-star. And I agree with what was said by Mary Margaret about, that your highest quality programs are going to be successful through an application process, but we do require that minimum threshold to be the 5-star. We also provide services, as I mentioned, at Durham Public Schools and at Head Start sites, in addition to those private childcare community-based programs. As I said, we do require all of our programs to be licensed, and we do provide a 6.5-hour day to mirror the NC Pre-K program. I think the last thing I'll say in terms of scope is locally funded for this fiscal year. We are paying for 676 locally funded seats with 43 funded classrooms at 24 sites. The rest of our seats that serve the over 1,750 children who are enrolled are coming from NC Pre-K, Title I, and Head Start. And so it is very much a braided model. It's a little bit different than some communities use. And I know Mary Margaret referred to shared professional development and different initiatives. We do also share professional development with our partners, but we also do have a universal application process. And in Durham, parents go through one door to access all of the public preschool services.
Thank you, Linda. I appreciate that. Leslie, I'm going to make your job a little bit harder. You'll have to forgive me. I'm going to tack on part of the next question since I know it's going to come up organically anyway. If you don't mind adding to the scope of your first question, how much funding from your program, how much funding is supporting the program locally? How much comes from the county government, corporate, philanthropic? Would you mind just tacking that on to your next question as we answer that? Because I think that it kind of naturally dovetails into some of where I think we're all headed.
Sure. So I would say, number one, to back up to the original question, the scope of what we're doing with our coalition is a bit different in that we are a collaborative unit of not only agencies, organizations, and individuals that are advocating for universal pre-K, but the power dynamic is very different in the way that we move in community because we're all kind of coming at this together, but there's not a central entity that is administering the programming. We are working together across Smart Start with our NC Pre-K program, with Family Services, who administers our Head Start and Early Head Start programming, and then, of course, the school system, which is the Winston-Salem Forsyth County school system that does actually the largest number of pre-K classrooms in our county. And then, of course, we have our private providers and family child home providers. So across all of those, we have in our steering committee stakeholders that represent all of those potential like collaborative units that are offering pre-K to our families here in Forsyth County. And what we have been trying to do over these last 8 years is bring along stakeholders that were in our local, the local county government, city government, and those folks' voices who could really help us where you've heard MEC and Durham talk about like there is a local investment. We have not had that, not except for the recent ARPA dollars, the American Rescue Fund monies that came in through COVID. We had not had any local investment, particularly, in a pre-K or early education kind of bucket to speak of until that time. Kind of hearkening back to what both Mary Margaret and Linda have said, we did a task force for a year long coming out of COVID We had an opportunity, that was our first opportunity to really have leaders of local, county, city government at the table with us. That was one thing we learned from Durham. We actually went to Durham in like 2018 and did a deep dive with them for a day of understanding where they were in the process and got a lot of great information. And we also, let me back up and say that there had been this kind of this learning group that would get together, kind of a group of community, a practice group that we do get together occasionally. We were doing that more regularly from 2017 till the pandemic. And so we did learn from even Asheville Buncombe. You guys were huge in terms of being a part of that movement. So we feel like we've been a little behind in Forsyth County, whereas you guys have had a dedicated local investment. We have not until the ARPA opportunity. Coming out of our task force, we had like, as I said, Durham had really said, you need to have somebody come alongside you from your county government and really be a champion for this. And we had continued to try to find that individual. And we did in Dr. Don Martin, who was the chairperson at the time, and he had been our previous superintendent of schools for 15 years. So he understood the importance of early education. And once he saw all the work that we had done for the past 3 years and understood what the motivation was, I think it was easier for him to get on board and really open up that window of opportunity with the ARPA dollars. So we had $4 million over a 2-year period, and we worked with 6 of our close partners, and Smart Start here locally in Forsyth County administered that $4 million that between the city and the county they gave us to do. And basically what we did was an enhanced version of 36 classrooms over 2 years. And so we did not, knowing that the ARPA dollars were time limited, we did not want to increase the number of classrooms and then have to pull those back after the dollars ended. So what we did was we went in after our task force and all the work we had done, highlighting what the recommendations would be for high quality. What we implemented were our partners putting into practice some of those high quality enhancements, as I think Linda was really kind of highlighting that they do with some of their work. We were able to enhance not only teacher pay to that same level as the Winston-Salem Forsyth County school teachers. So to make sure that all the teachers in those 36 classrooms had that equitable pay. We also gave a bonus for retention year to year. And actually even kind of quarter to quarter, we were doing more of that retention bonus to keep those teachers. And we had spread this 36 classrooms across the private sector, a couple in Head Start, a couple in the school system, and a couple of in NC Pre-K, so that we could do measurable outcomes at the end of that, and then hopefully compare it to a cohort that had not had those enhancements. So the other things I would mention is we gave all of the classrooms the creative curriculum. A lot of that was already being done in the publicly funded sector, but not in the private centers. So they got that enhanced curricula tools. And then we were also very mindful of making sure that we had the family and parent we were invested in that in a way that we had not been before. And we really wanted to bring parent focus models that were used in Head Start. So we had our family advocate model that Head Start helped us implement across all those classrooms. So we had a lot more parent involvement and focus on parents. Smart Start was also doing a focus on fathers and males in education. So they were happy to kind of help us with that, boosting that aspect of the demographics. And then I think the final thing I would say on what we were able to do during that 2 years is we implemented Brigance. If any of you guys are aware of that assessment tool, we had not, we were just using like TS Gold and some of the other things that were typically used, but our county commissioners really wanted to push us based on some of the data I think they'd seen at the Frank Porter Graham Institute. about the Brigance assessment. And I've actually talked to one or two of the teachers since then, and they came from another state where Brigance was used, and they were like, we were so glad that Brigance was implemented because we think it gives a lot more robust kind of report on what children, how they're experiencing the social emotional world. So anyway, all that to say, there was a lot of learning, and we're getting ready, and I can make sure you guys are all invited. We're getting ready next Wednesday to present like our final 2-year community report out on what the outcomes, the measurables were. We had a service out of Charlotte called Prismatic. They helped us with the independent evaluation of all the data that was collected. We did a data collection through a local analytics firm called Foresight Futures. And then, of course, we did go heavy on the professional development and coaching. What we did find, though, I'll just say this because this could be helpful for others to know as you go forward in this kind of work. One of the things we found in trying to implement more professional development was that 2 things we found, and I think Durham had mentioned this to us when we were there, you really need to go to the teachers first and the educators and ask what they need instead of maybe intimating what you think they need based on, best practices, but really have them invested in that professional development. Some of those courses that are offered but not necessarily required. But if you want great attendance, make sure it's what they want. And then the other thing was we were very heartened to see in the final outcome of the numbers that the literacy and math achievement scores did bear out that those enhancements worked. So they were much higher compared to some state numbers and those that had not had pre-K. And then also the social emotional, those Brigance numbers showed incredible increases. And then, of course, we have some anecdotal stories that were just great for people to understand how this impacts people personally on a day-to-day basis for families. So we're excited about sharing that with our community, and we hope that it will propel maybe some additional investment. I will end on saying, though, we do not have any guaranteed investment moving forward, except, and this is important to note, that the work I've been able to do helping kind of shepherd this coalition has been provided by the Kate B. Reynolds Charitable Trust that is local. So for over the last 8 years, we were very fortunate to kind of dovetail with what they were doing called the Great Expectations Initiative across Forsyth County. And that was about any and all 5-year-olds being prepared to go to school and succeed. So that was really focused on a breadth of different services from infancy up through 4-year-olds. And we were part of that initiative. And so they had been incredibly generous to fund the work of the management of this coalition. And then also you may see my colleague Iris Cole is here from mCreative, and she and her team have been instrumental in the communications, the messaging, and the strategy around how we meet the community and have them understand why this is important. Because as you guys know, the narrative around Forsyth County right now with the school system kind of debacle around our budget has really been a wedge issue now around who we ask for money, how we ask for money, and how we partner with our schools to not only boost what they're doing and where how they're moving out of the debt issue, but reinforcing that our public schools are incredibly important. And that is really at the heart, again, of what we're trying to do with universal pre-K. So I'll leave that. I know that's a lot, but we are right now anticipating that hopefully in the next year or two, we will be able to really be at a position to go out and request funding in a new way. But who knows if it's going to be with the county or with some philanthropic or some other foundation group. We'll see.
Excellent. Thank you, Leslie. Linda, Mary Margaret, if either of you want to jump in.
I'm happy to jump in. But before I talk about Durham for a minute, I want to just mention that, we did have the privilege of visiting with Forsyth. And I think that if you unpack these two counties in North Carolina, what is absolutely just a really foundational issue to me is in Forsyth, they had the benefit of investment from the philanthropic community, but they were at a place where they were trying to coalesce and build public will, educate the community about the why, and the potential for the future, as well as a strong desire by advocates to build the will of the elected community, the elected officials. And so they were very much coming from that direction, whereas Durham was kind of, I don't want to say the opposite, but just a really different place in that for Durham, there has been minimal, modest philanthropic investment, but the political will had been built for about 25 years prior to about 2015, prior to 2015, where many of the elected officials had been influenced and had been hand in hand with the advocates. So it was just a little bit of a flip. And so we all have to work constantly to build that public will to make sure people understand the why and what the potential is. But it's just, it's so much about where does your community sit in this space? And how do you pull those threads together to really build that support web, because it obviously can be very different in different places. So just getting back to your questions. So in Durham, the program is primarily funded by Durham County government. The direct preschool budget for fiscal year 26, which, let me be clear, does not include the Title I funds coming from the feds, does not include the Smart Start funds that are supplementing NC Pre-K, does not include the Head Start, the Federal Head Start Fund, does not include the state NC Pre-K money. So setting that pile of money aside, the local investment for fiscal year 26 right now sits at $11,500,000 out of the county budget. That is recurring dollars. Okay. Now, let me back up a little bit. Some of that goes to the school system as designated for preschool, which is a little bit different than the regular school's budget. But then separate from that, $2.4 million in ARPA dollars that end in November of 26 were invested this year also, which was new for Durham Pre-K. We received some temporary ARPA dollars to support some infrastructure development and database needs, as well as to sustain some seat allocations during a period of change. So, and then in addition to that, we have a little over $400,000 in other funding, including philanthropic and other dollars. Now, that money, like I said, does not include the state investment in NC Pre-K, the Smart Start investment in NC Pre-K, which of course is state dollars, but doesn't include Title I, all that. So if you look at the entire landscape of Durham serving 42% of the 4-year-old census, those local dollars do not pay for 42% of the census. What they do, however, pay for are those seats that I previously mentioned, which are the locally funded seats, almost 700 seats at a variety of sites. So just want to kind of put that in context of, because we're a braided program, we leverage dollars and we enhance seats, and we also create new seats. So these local dollars that are in the recurring county budget didn't happen overnight. It built over time. And in fact, we will be looking to try to find ways to backfill for the ARPA dollars that are ending, just as anybody with temporary funding. I want to be sure I answered your real question, but you had asked about, what the investment is. So that's where we are in terms of the investment at this point.
Thank you very much, Linda. And Mary Margaret?
Yeah, so, again, I'm gonna speak specifically about MEC Pre-K, which is the county-funded program, goes to say it's 100,000% funded by the county tax dollars. And runs separate from it. So there are no philanthropic dollars, there are no corporate dollars, there are no anything. MEC Pre-K is 1,000% county funded. For fiscal year 26, I'm at just over 20, I'm like at 28.2 million. And again, that's to operate 115 classrooms spread out across the county, serving, I'm going to say 2,050 children. It changes a little bit. We do have some therapeutic sites. So technically I have seats there, but I don't fill those classrooms to 18. So, which is our typical class size. Again, it was a response from the county to the Chetty study, that said, basically you were in deep trouble if you were born into a low income situation in Charlotte. But the thing it really stressed was the way to address that is to, have these universal settings and these universal opportunities, so that, all children are being served, all families are being served. Because again, it's a very comprehensive program. I have a whole department that works with families, and I have a whole department that works with children who show up to us with special needs, whether it was already known or we discover it while they're with us. So I have a whole unit that works with that. We've been approved by the state a couple of years ago, and we have our own teacher evaluation, and we're what was that called? Beginning Teacher Support Program. We're certified by the state. So that includes a lot of wrap things that support the program overall. But to you, county commissioners who are on the call, you here in Mecklenburg are essentially, you're my bosses, right? It's to you I answer. It's to you I provide all that data, because you're the ones making that decision every year. So, we like to think we're in good shape. We provide tons and tons of data. And to Leslie's point, Brigance is one of our big pieces. We use it beginning of year and end of year. And the growth we're able to show in our children is just, like Leslie said, it's just phenomenal. And it proves that what we're doing is working. But obviously, commissioners are very interested in a lot of other data. So there's a ton of other data and assessments that we use and report on every year. And we're in that delicate time right now. We've already started our budget talks for next year. Our proposed budget will be due to the county early March. And then, of course, we hang on that thread until June 30th, June 29th. When they finally vote and say, yep, okay, onward for the next year. So, but there are enough hearings and things that we're usually pretty certain about where we're going to land well before the actual vote on the budget takes place. So we appear before the commissioners and present our data and answer questions and all of that well in advance. But in terms of MEC Pre-K, it's completely tax fund, county tax dollars.
Fantastic. Well, I'm going to merge a couple questions because I realize when we're having fun, time flies, but we want to pick you for all your brains for all your worth. So forgive me if I do a speed round with you. One of the ones that's going to be kind of the hardest to encapsulate for us is figuring out what the challenges are. And we want to learn from what that has meant for each one of you in your respective programs as we're trying to chart our own course. So if I can ask you, and we'll dig into it more on the back end, because I think we have a ton of questions about what you're going to say. But if you had to list just off the bat, two of the biggest challenges that you ran into, it can be past or present, but two of the biggest challenges you ran into in implementing your programs, that might kind of spur us having some organic discussion about what we're facing here and what y'all faced and how we can kind of steer clear or be ready to mitigate some of those circumstances that might have been challenges for you over the past couple of years.
I'll start. So for us, the looming issue always is the the need for increased wages, benefits, increased costs of healthcare. Preschool teachers historically have been undervalued and undercompensated. And although we're trying to make sure that teachers are fairly compensated in the public arena, it costs a lot of money. And the larger ecosystem out there that just says, being a teacher is not the best path career-wise in many people's estimation. And so we're constantly working to sell the incredible opportunity it is to work with children. And that requires a constant investment. So we're not only marketing and reaching out to families to teach them about the opportunity that early education is for their child's success, but we are also constantly having to market to professionals in teaching to try to go to school, get their credentials, invest, that type of thing. So that's just a huge, and from that we ended up doing a lot of workforce development that we never really expected. We built out an apprenticeship program that also creates monetary needs in terms of investments, but we're in it for the long haul. Right now we have, for example, we have 38 apprentices who are working toward getting their 2-year college degree to then go in a pathway to get their BK license. So, this is a long-term need for investment. So that for us has been a huge one. The other issue is the very real issue of wrap care. Families, a 6.5-hour day of preschool is not enough for many working families. And access to wrap care before and after school hours, not only the cost of wrap care, but the availability of wrap care, those are huge challenges that we underestimated at the very beginning of how much of a cost, what the need would be, and what the impact would be. And of course, COVID coming along did also really impact that, strained the system that was already providing wrap care. So those were kind of two things, but there's a million of them, but those are two that continue to have to be addressed and worked on a constant basis.
Yeah, I would echo that, Linda. And Linda and I have met over the years in different ways, and so we already know we agree on a lot of these things. So, one way we do approach that doesn't always work, but in order to be a MEC pre-K site, you have to offer wrap care. That's part of one of our criteria for being chosen as a community site, because she's absolutely right. There are very, very few parents who can do the 6.5-hour day, which is what MEC pre-K is. So that is definitely, but it's, and then the paying for it. We're lucky the county invests quite a bit in a separate budget, not coming out of the MEC pre-K budget. In a separate budget, there is a child care supplement that is available to MEC pre-K families. But then we also work with, our families on vouchers. And so we have all kinds of ways to try and meet that cost. Definitely the recruiting enough highly qualified teachers, because you're right. Unfortunately, early childhood suffers from, even when we say, but you're paid the same as a AP biology teacher, which is absolutely true. Excuse me. Like Linda, I'm just coming out being really sick. So, that is definitely one, and I don't have a solution. The only other one I'm going to offer up, which has become worse in the last couple of years, is the number of children we're seeing with special needs. That provides such a huge challenge to us. And again, I have 2, 3, 4. I have a department of 6 people that's working with just that, working with these families, and trying to get the support services children need, get them into the special ed services that they need. But the numbers of children, both cognitive, developmentally, and behaviorally, that we're seeing, where it's taxing our regular resources and our regular classroom supports. It's kind of moving outside the purview and expertise even of our success coaches and all of that. So I'm gonna add that to the list of, that's a real challenge. And we kept saying it's gonna get better after COVID, okay? They just gotta get through, the ones who were babies during COVID, the ones who were, it hasn't let up at all. If anything, it's increased. So I add that as I put that at the top of my list right now of our biggest challenge.
Well, I would,
Fantastic.
sorry, Martin. I would just echo the things that both Linda and Mary Margaret have noted are, and I'm sure Asheville Buncombe has seen the same thing in terms of the workforce. I think there's the childcare academies that just got approved for some, different, I think 16 counties. And I forgive me for not knowing if you guys counties are a part of that, but Forsyth is. And so we have Smart Start that's going to be working with Forsyth Technical Community College to try to do these childcare academies to kind of fast track some of the teachers through getting credentialed. I think the other thing, the RAP care is something we've been looking at. We tried to do, we work with our local Child Care Resource Centers, what they're called here, and they have been an excellent partner in all regards of early childhood, understanding the private providers, the family childcare homes, even looking at family friend and neighbor care, how you can elevate family friends and neighbors who are doing this care and want more resources. But in all of those, the RAP care is an issue that we also underestimated, and the transportation issue that Linda kind of, she tapped into that too when you're talking about trying to move children from different places. So it's interesting to hear Mary Margaret say, when you guys are having applications for your new classrooms, that site has to have that. So that's interesting. We have what's very interesting here too, is that we have Imprints Cares, another one of our partners here. They do a lot of after school care and before school across different sites. They work over the summer with children, typically developing children and children with special needs. And then we also have what is called Alpha Best, which is it's also kind of a RAP care program. So we have those two entities that are kind of part of our group, and we've been trying to figure out ways to generate opportunities where there are those gaps. But it's tough. I think the other thing I would mention, and this, you guys at Durham and MEC, I think have already worked through this by maybe the nature of the way you developed and how the administration is done with your local dollars. But just to be quite candid, and maybe Asheville Buncombe, you guys have not run into this, but I think when you talk about changing a system that's been kind of built, like a puzzle over time out of kind of the resources you had, people have gotten very used to, okay, this is my lane and this is what I do. And when we had started to come together and try to build some ways of working together that are different over the last 6 or 7 years, two of the biggest challenges have been changing a system that has been built with, just kind of the scraps of what is there, is a mindset of scarcity. And it's true, but it's also, you have to flip that on its head sometimes and think more about the resiliency of how we can come and have different opportunities and do things in a new way. And so that's been challenging, not only because people are trying to protect what they have and keep their employees employed, but also because I think we've had leadership changes. As most of you guys probably noticed, during the COVID pandemic, a lot of folks decided to retire or move into other areas. And so we had a very huge turnover of folks that had been on our steering committee that had been committed to this work for 3 or 4 years, that not that they didn't care about it anymore, but they were moving on in different ways. And so it was kind of like reinstituting a new group of folks to understand all of the institutional knowledge that we had gained, and then but having their voices be just as important with their new ideas. So I think that is one thing too, when you bring in new people, the onboarding that is required, but then also being open to hearing new ideas and new ways of working. And maybe for leaders, I think it's been really difficult sometimes for them to take that hat off of their organization and think about how they can work more collectively while still doing what they're, what they have to do when they go back and sit in their office. So those have been two challenges on like a systems change level that have been difficult. And I know that we're not alone in that.
Yeah, and just
Well-
real quickly, I want to say about that is that a lot of us, when this work really began deeply, there was a certain level of optimism that there was going to be a federal investment in preschool, in universal preschool, and that did not materialize. And I think that the fatigue of the advocates and the fatigue of our community is a very real and powerful issue that we all have to be mindful of on a regular basis.
I'm unmuting to take the baton from our chair for a minute. Martin Moore is also a working attorney and had to step away. And I know one of our panelists mentioned at the top that you have a short amount of time with us. It's Mary Margaret, representing Mecklenburg Pre-K. Mary, I would give you the floor briefly to offer any additional thoughts, questions that we didn't ask you, or words of wisdom or advice to a county seeking to maximize investments in early care.
And I'm just putting something in the chat too with my email address and saying, I will speak to any of you individually in a group again, anytime, happy to help anybody trying to do this work because fatigue is the word, Linda. It's just, in fact, part of what I'm going to this meeting I'm being called into is we're trying to gather our resources with the whole news that came out federally yesterday. That's Smart Start as a whole, we're reacting to that. But then for Pre-K, the panic is, should God forbid these funds be frozen or whatever, I'm afraid some of our centers where we have classrooms would close down. I've got the funding to run the classroom, but if the center can't run, what would happen to our classrooms? So I think the fatigue and the fear is just ridiculous. And I'm not going to end as a Debbie Downer. I'm really not, but I'm in my 45th year in this field, 45 years working directly with early childhood education. And I've never been as disheartened as I am right now. And that's not to say, locally, I know we have tons of support. We're very blessed in Mecklenburg County. We have wonderful government and, we've been able to build here at Pre-K proof for our existence and all that, but that's 2,000 kids. I mean, while I'm glad I can do that, it's a teeny, 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 tiny drop in a huge ocean. Where I think the news is just getting worse for early childhood rather than better. So I would just encourage you to continue. Collaboration works, cooperation works, shared experience works. I would just encourage you to continue, to use all of those means and methods. And just keeping, we say all the time here, the children are the center. If you ever want to get centered and figure out why you're doing what you're doing, just go spend an hour in one of the classrooms and you'll come out and go, okay, now I know why I do this. I absolutely know why, I'm putting my skin on the line every single day and why I'm having to answer the same question 50,000 times, but it's an hour in a classroom and you'll be good to go again. So, yeah, Astral Buncombe, good luck. Again, I will help you in any way I can.
Thank you for your leadership and for being part of that community of practice. I know that our communities have exchanged ideas and
yes, we have, and we need to do that again, y'all. There's several of us on the call here. We need to just set a time and get on that phone or this Zoom and just to bring each other some peace. So yeah, I'm putting my contact information in the chat right now, and yeah, thank you. Good to see everybody I know. Nice to meet those of you that I don't. And I hope to see you all again in the future.
Much appreciated. Thank you, Mary Margaret.
Thank you.
So let's stick with that for a second. And this is to Linda. as well as Leslie or others, if you are here with them and haven't had a chance to chime in. I see we have a few other folks like Tamara and Rachel and Iris, if she's still here. Anyway, what does work? What are some other bright spots or promising practices that you have been noticing lately and been talking about among your teams lately?
Well, let's see. And I do think we should pivot to the positive. I think that one of the real advantages of local investment is, this very real commitment to the landscape of your community and what is really needed. So, for example, for Durham Pre-K, we had operated for about 3 school years, and what happened, we began, and then when COVID hit, that obviously was a huge challenge. And we were able, because we had local resources with the support of our elected officials, we were able during the pandemic to tweak our resources. For example, we typically pay by attendance, and we pay sites for the service to the children. Of course, makes sense. But the reality is that obviously in the pandemic, everything was flipped on its head. But even outside of the pandemic, if you think about the early care and education model in this country, it is, I think it was Leslie that said this kind of puzzle piece development. It has developed over time, and you have your for-profit community, you have nonprofit childcare programs, you have public schools, you have Head Start, you have all these things that have very different needs. And with local dollars, you have the opportunity to do a really deep needs assessment and identify where those local gaps are. And for us in Durham, what we saw very clearly, and it was exacerbated during the pandemic, is that when you have absences, or when you have long-term absences, or you have open seats, vacancies, and you have a model that only pays for a filled seat, those expenses haven't disappeared because the seat was vacant. You still have to, you have to staff the classroom, you have to have all these things. Obviously, some of your expenses go down. But what we faced, and we really turned and faced strongly with our governance, Durham Pre-K has a governance committee that functions like a board. Durham Pre-K is not its own nonprofit. It is a county program, but we have a separate governance committee that functions like a board, sets policy. Now, it is true that if the board sets a policy that is extremely innovative or progressive or unheard of, the county has the final say. So the county could potentially come in and make changes to policy based on their role as a funder. However, they never have. Governance has set policy, and the county has never overruled governance. So it does function very much like a board. And we studied this issue of the funding gap because we had programs who were enrolled that struggled to meet our requirements to pay teachers at the school system pay scale. And the reality is that that's a lot, that's a big expense compared to typical childcare. Now, we have a high reimbursement rate, and that's because of all of our requirements. But what we did was we said, okay, how do we handle this gap in funding, and what can we really realistically do about it? So we created a pre-service payment. We haven't been able to find any other program doing this. I'm not saying there isn't one, but we have not been able to find one. The pre-service payment, when a site signs their contract for the school year to serve children using public dollars, they get a pre-service payment to help mitigate the impact of vacancies throughout the year. We budget for about a 10% vacancy rate at any given time. That's because in this age, in our society, families are very mobile, things happen. You're Some sites stay full 100% all the time. Don't get me wrong, but we budget for a 10% vacancy rate because many sites have volatility depending on where they're located in the community, what their constituency is. And this pre-service payment is paid to the site to, number one, give them some money before school starts. Because in the childcare model, they get paid after service. So during the school year, they get paid after service. So the pre-service payment gives them a one-time payment each school year. This innovative way of structuring payments has absolutely turned around many of our sites and their very volatile budget situations, because that money is what they can use to and can count on to get through the year when there may be some months where there are a few vacancies. So that's just one thing. But my point in bringing that up is local investment means you meet local need. That's a common need across all early childhood programs, but in our community in particular, we have a lot of private childcare that is owned and operated by small business owners, women of color, very high investment in our community in smaller childcare programs. We have very few nonprofit childcare programs in Durham. We do of course still have chain programs that are corporate, and that's a different animal. A discussion for a different day. But because when you have a chain, obviously it may not have a community frame. It may have a chain frame. But anyway, I think that we've really tried to maximize the local investment to adapt the structure to meet the gaps in the community and to lift up NC Pre-K. So
thanks for flagging that, Linda. The flexibility and innovation there that can come with local dollars. I know several of us are reading a book that you all may be familiar with, The Daycare Myth. The writer did a lot of his professional career in North Carolina, and he talked about that paying by attendance as well. And so cool to hear about that free service payment tool that y'all are using. I want to pivot us for the last 15 minutes. And hopefully Martin will be back on shortly, but before we go to our next question, others want to chime in, mindful of time, chiming in about other bright spots or promising things that you'd like to put out there for discussion?
I'll just mention briefly, Iris reminded me of this as a bright spot that we're going to be delving into this year is getting our businesses, local businesses, really more engaged and connected to early childcare and education here locally in Forsyth County. We started this last year with a big push about how the workforce is related to the economic development model of any county and how we are missing out on tapping into not only how it helps parents stay in the workforce, but how we can encourage more of our local young adults to pursue this. So there have been some things that we've done. We've partnered with a couple of our local community folks that are kind of centered around workforce, like the county, some of the economic things at the commissioners, the North Carolina commissioners at the state level, because they have, Iris, I'm trying to think of her name, Samantha.
Cole.
Yes.
Yeah, Samantha Cole.
So
Yeah.
Samantha had come out and we partnered with a couple of, like, our Leadership Winston-Salem group. We have a Reach Women's Network here of local women leaders in business. So we had highlighted those connections last year and had human resource professionals also talk about ways that you can be innovative and things that even some of you guys locally, I think, in your own communities are doing to incentivize businesses to really lean into this in a way that doesn't take away from their business model, but really enhances the way they're able to bring opportunity to more of their family-oriented kind of goals. You know, if that is their goal, but really keeping your people employed. So we also have a Greater Winston-Salem, that's our Chamber of Commerce. They've been great partners in this too, but that is an opportunity that we feel is a bright spot that we're going to lean into more heavily this coming year.
Thank you, Leslie, for highlighting business engagement. That's definitely been a topic of a lot of local conversation here. And I think it's also cool that Iris is here as a representative of a firm that focuses on strategic communication. That's an interesting angle and aspect to think about as we roll out a new focused investment for Buncombe County. Just for context, we invest in a variety of different types of grants rather than a focused program that might be more similar to, well, I should make sure I'm wording myself clearly. Mecklenburg and Durham have more of a focused program, whereas Buncombe County has more diverse investments. And so we're looking at what would a focused investment or investments look like if we make that pivot. So thank you definitely for highlighting the role previously in the conversation about having philanthropy there, and also now about the role of business partnership and or business investment, as well as some of those other pieces that were lifted up earlier, like building public will and the political support. Let me just scan for Martin. I'd like to ask members of the committee if you have any quick questions that you want to that are burning for you that you want to put on the floor while we still have about 15 minutes. We do not have anyone signed up for public comment. However, we do try to keep this meeting pretty concise and want to wrap up at 2:30, but want to make sure to have the opportunity to engage with our panelists at this time. So if you would raise your hand, either with your real hand or your little electronic hand. Carol, thank you for chiming in.
And out of curiosity, I wanted to clarify, maybe Dr. Chappell, you mentioned a threshold or goal that your county was reaching towards. Was that 75 of 4-year-olds, and that's not eligible 4-year-olds? It's based off the census of, and so
Yes.
within that
75%.
metric, is there a way that you assess that there's actually demand, or do you know if there is a percentage of the population that's not interested in the pre-K experience, and how do you carve that out of your goals? Maybe you're actually much more successful than you think, or how are you splicing that?
Well, let me start by saying that when we began this journey, we did receive funding to do, so as a child care resource and referral agency, part of our job at Early Years is to manage data, to collect data around early education, and we do county level analysis. And we did a deep dive. Happy to share it. It's a few years old now. We're getting ready to propose a new one, but a supply and demand report, a traditional report that really prioritized surveying families in addition to looking at the landscape of available opportunities in the community, as well as what parents need. You know, you don't ever want to build something and have expectations that are not grounded in reality. And we did a deep dive on the census numbers and also the trends of children enrolled in formal care, licensed formal care, which this is formal care, and the very real fact that for many families, licensed regulated care is not their choice. You know, family, friend, and neighbor care is very strong. Other types of non-group care are very important to many families. And so, number one, we would never make an expectation that every 4-year-old that their parent wants them enrolled in group-based care. That's just not true. And for the Durham community in particular, we were also working very closely with the preschool task force, which had a whole subcommittee of data analysts who volunteered their time to really study this deeply. And we actually surveyed across the community, divided into census tracts and zip codes that also looked at demographics. And we actually surveyed families about whether or not they wanted a public preschool option. And so that was really important. From all of that work, as well as looking at trends around the country, trends in North Carolina, and the reality of the community, the preschool task force set a goal of having enough seats for 75% of the 4-year-old census. Now, from doing this now in our 8th year, the governance committee is really taking a deep dive into what is the real need. And we do believe that that 75% will probably be tweaked down a little bit. However, by the trend analysis and by the growth in population in Durham, by the demand for the program, we believe between 70 and 75 is the real target. But every community is different, obviously.
Thank you for that. And percent of children served in licensed care has been one of those things that we have flagged as a metric to watch, although setting goals around it isn't something that we've done. And interesting to look by age and look at how that differs, as well as look community by community. Just for awareness, the handout that was included in the packet for today's meeting aggregates all 0 to 5 preschoolers into a single sort of aggregated percentage, as opposed to a just 4-year-old. So keep that in mind if you're looking at thinking about the number that Dr. Linda, is it Chappelle or Chapel?
It's Chappelle, but it doesn't matter.
Put up for us.
I hope I answered your question, Ms. Steen, but I do think, obviously it's about access also. It's about not only, many families don't really have a choice because they cannot afford a high quality program. So it's about how much quality is available. What is that access point? And does that access point really meet family needs? Because transportation is a huge barrier, as has already been mentioned, as well as wrap care. So, and many families work off hours, and that's a whole nother need area that's not addressed by a 6.5-hour day public preschool program.
Indeed. Other hands from committee members? Adrian, Dr. Sandler?
Thank you, and thanks all for really providing, giving us your time and opportunity to discuss these issues that we have in common. I'd like to ask if any of you have been addressing the shortages of family childcare homes. This is something that we've seen in data here locally. So whether there's any sort of specific focus on supporting the development of the family childcare home sector. I'm also interested, Iris, if you could tell us more about how you go about making this business case, because I think that really is going to be an important opportunity for us. So those are the 2 questions that come to mind. Thank you.
Thank you.
I can be really brief. One, yes, in parallel to the Durham Pre-K initiative, we have been working very closely with our community around family child care homes. Yes, obviously the numbers in North Carolina in every county are very grim with closures everywhere. We actually have been exploring the potential for adding family child care to the public preschool initiative, which is if it were to happen, is way down the road. But in parallel, we do work with providers who are interested in opening programs, as well as providing no cost support for people who are already operating programs. But that is a whole nother sector of need that, is a whole nother meeting for sure. So.
And is it fair to say, Dr. Chappelle, that's not a thriving sector in Durham at this time?
There has been, the programs that are open, many are very robust, but there has been that decline in the number of programs.
Yeah.
Yes, as it has been. I don't, there are very few counties in North Carolina that are seeing growth in that sector.
Yep. And we do have an angle or an aspect to this project looking at business partnership. We intended to have, and maybe it worked out better that we didn't end up with a tri-share here so that we could have more time for the programs who are here. But we do want to come back and talk more about not only the case, which I appreciate your question about, but also methods for business partnership and investment. Quickly, knowing that we don't have time to do the topic justice, Iris, did you want to respond to Adrian's question briefly?
Yeah, I had a couple of just sort of quick thoughts and happy to discuss it more. But I think, to start out, we had to really focus in on looking at the pain points of economic development in our community. And as we saw such a high rise in strategies around bringing businesses, bringing entrepreneurs to bear in our community to grow economic development, we had to really work hard communicating what the direct connection between pre-K or early childhood education was with their being, ability to achieve that, whether it's strengthening the school system as a whole or strengthening the pipeline, or, just for anybody that they're trying to recruit, families are coming and the first thing they're going to do is look at their options. And so making that connection and then converting key business leaders into champions by designing events or initiatives that were in really strong strategic partnerships. So we started out with an event with our local chamber. So the head of our chamber became a very immediately front-facing vocal advocate as his own, from the lens of being a parent, from the lens of being the head of economic development. And then, that led to them actually saying, look, we're trying to do a program to bring businesses here. We could actually include a family-friendly component in that certification if you'll work with us to get that done. And so that led to something we never even imagined, but something that holds their feet to the fire is a strategic partner, and them clearly understanding how this benefits them have been really pivotal to opening that door. And so, this document that I put here was, it was a leave behind for that kickoff event. And our goal this year is to really sort of move that slowly but surely into small, high-level social groups that are connected to the business community as a whole.
Thank you for flagging that you had shared a document in the chat, and there is also an event link and some other content in there throughout the conversation. We have time for one more quick question. No one is up for the challenge. I know that all of your wheels are turning, as are mine. And we have come off a series of months of really rich conversation, listening to experts that come from various perspectives and points of view. And so having the chance to bring in other North Carolina counties that are looking at local investment has been enriching. Even if a condensed conversation, we have all of your contact information and are glad to facilitate follow-up questions. I know, Leslie, you mentioned sharing out some event info. If you send that to me or Angela, and who you communicated with to set up this, we'll cascade it out to the rest of the group. Likewise, any other follow-up things that come our way. And like I said, as our previous panelist was getting ready to depart, we really just appreciate being part of this larger community of practice. We know that our local Smart Start Buncombe Partnership for Children collaborates with you all regularly, and it's great to come in as members of an investment committee to hear from you. We didn't get to all the topics that we'd hoped. Public policy is another big one that we wrestle with as a local government, getting in on a system that is very influenced by state and federal policy and investment. So lots of topics to keep the conversation going about in the future, and just a lot of appreciation for the committee members who made time to join today. We're not usually an all virtual crew, so we made it work. Martin, I see you're back. I think you mentioned being in a listening mode. I just want to check with you before I close the meeting on your behalf. If you've got the ability to wrap, I'd love to pass back to you.
I am happy to jump back in. I appreciate everyone being patient with me. We have too many meetings scheduled on a Tuesday for the same job. So Linda, thank you so much. Leslie, thank you so much for donating your expertise, your talents, and your willingness to collaborate. I don't think anybody has the perfect playbook for this space, but really us figuring it out together and learning from each other seems like the best path forward. And I can certainly say as commissioner, we lean heavily on all the folks who are doing the work because it makes it a lot easier for us to hear the priorities, and just truly continuing to re-examine that seems like the best path forward. I will go ahead and comply with the law since I see our county attorney is with us today. Is anyone here for public comment? I'm going to assume no, but
we have no public comment.
Wonderful. Okay, well, we have no announcements. All of you, thank you so much for being engaged, even via Zoom, and we will go ahead and reconvene, send any follow-up questions, and I will see you all next month.
Thanks for having us.
Hi, everybody.